Hello and welcome to the FatBoss guide to Coven of Shivarra on normal and heroic in Antorus, the Burning Throne.
Yes, this is a council style fight where you'll be fighting 3 different bosses, each with their own toolkit, although you'll only be directly engaging 2 at any given time as the bosses rotate throughout the fight. The inactive boss will be tormenting the souls of the Pantheon found around the edges of the room, which causes them to cast some really powerful abilities that the entire raid will need to deal with every 90 seconds. Now these bosses have a shared health pool, but you cannot stack them because if they're within 18 yards of each other, they'll take 99% less damage. The tanks throughout the fight just need to make sure they're split up, and during quieter parts of the fight, the tanks should try and keep them as close as possible to each other without proccing the damage reduction, so that some of the DPS can cleave between them.
When you start the fight, Dima will jump out and begin to torment the Titans. You'll be fighting Nora and Asara. Let's go through Asara's abilities first. Alongside dealing some small bursts of damage to the raid with her Touch of Darkness cast, she'll also be sending out 3 Shadow Blades. These will hover inside a hitbox for a second before slowly moving across the room in straight lines. If you get hit by these, you'll take a big burst of damage and be knocked back. You've got to make sure that you dodge them. On heroic, she will cast Storm of Darkness, and this ability is really dangerous and is the #1 thing that will wipe your raid in the entire encounter. This cast deals a crazy amount of ticking damage to the raid over 15 seconds. Multiple safe zones, however, will spawn in the arena, and whilst you remain in these zones, you completely avoid the damage. You need to immediately move to these zones, as even standing within the storm for a couple of seconds can kill you. We highly recommend that you use at least 1 healing cooldown for every single time the Storm of the Darkness spawns, just to cover any initial damage that the storm does to players that are moving to zones. Tanks will want to move to separate zones so that bosses do not gain the damage reduction from being too close.
Next up, let's talk about Nora. The tanks want to face her away from anyone else because of her fiery strike. This is a frontal cleave which also applies a debuff which increases the damage you take from this ability by 100%, and this stacks. This will force you to tank swap eventually, generally around the 3 stack mark. Just make sure you taunt each other's bosses at the same time so that they remain spread out. Nora will also cast Whirling Saber. This throws out a sword, dealing damage and knocking back anyone who stands within its targeting circle as it lands. The sword will then start slowly travelling back towards Nora while spinning around, dealing damage to anyone nearby. You just need to sidestep out of the sword's path as it travels back to her. This ability can be cast while a Storm of Darkness is active. You must avoid the landing zone, otherwise you might get knocked into the storm and probably die. Now on heroic, Nora will apply fulminating pulse debuffs to a bunch of people at once. This is a 10-second hard-hitting dot that will explode at the end, dealing a nasty burst of damage to anyone within 6 yards. You need to make sure that you move away from anyone else when you have this debuff. If you have the debuff and don't receive any direct healing, it is likely that you'll die if you don't use a personal cooldown, so healers need to focus hard on keeping these debuff players healthy. Just like the Whirling Saber, this debuff can be applied during or just before a storm. It is vital that players are given space within the safe zone so they don't splash damage onto the raid. If the debuff is about to expire as the storm starts, you'll likely be instantly killed if you're not lucky enough to already be within a safe zone. Using a damage reductions or immunities will definitely save you here. So you'll be dealing with these 2 bosses alongside the dangerous Titan abilities for just over 3 minutes. At this point, Nora will leave the encounter area and Dima will enter. So before we talk about the Titan abilities, let's just cover what Dima does first.
Dima will frequently hit the tanks with Flash Freeze. This deals a burst of damage to the tank and also applies a debuff which reduces your movement speed by 10% for 20 seconds. The tanks will need to taunt off one another again for this debuff at around 3 stacks, just so they can continue to move around the encounter area quickly. She'll also be applying Chill Blood debuffs to multiple players in the raid. This is a 10-second healing absorption debuff. When this times out, you'll be stunned for a while depending on how much healing absorb was left on the debuff, with longer stuns lasting for debuffs with more healing absorb remaining. Healers want to focus hard on removing these debuffs to prevent anyone from getting stunned. On heroic, Dima will cast Orb of Frost. This spawns a giant orb at the location of a ranged player that deals a burst of damage to the entire raid. The orb will then linger for 20 seconds, slowing anyone within 30 yards by up to 85%, with players closer to the orb being slowed by higher amounts. As this always spawns on ranged players, you want those players to get to the edges of the room before this ability is cast so you can bait it away from the middle of the room. This allows you to move around the room pretty much unimpeded and allows you to get into those safe zones nice and quickly. And that's all the boss's individual abilities. Let's have a look at the Tormented Titan mechanics. Whilst the inactive boss is at the sides of the room, they will be tormenting one of the 4 randomly selected Titans over 80 seconds. During this time, the raid will be taking ever-increasing ticking damage that the healers just simply need to outheal. 10 seconds after the end of their torment channel, the Tormented Titan will unleash untankable adds that the raid needs to deal with.
Torment of Aman'Thul adds have long uninterruptible casts that will cause them to apply a dot on the raid which can stack, and at the end of the cast the ad will heal up to full health. The raid must focus down these ads to make sure they die before the cast goes off. If you're unable to kill all of the ads before their first cast, you should focus on just killing a few of them before switching to the ads that just healed up to full. Torment of Golganeth ads will do a nasty burst of damage to any player who stands within 2 yards of anyone else. The raid just needs to be pre-spread for these ads, and as soon as they spawn, you just want to focus them down. Torment of Khaz'goroth ads will be spaced evenly around the sides of the room. All of these ads will channel a flamethrower into the center of the arena, which will quickly kill any player who stands within them. If you move to the sides of the room before the ability comes in, you can quickly stand between 2 of these ads, and once you're safe, just kill off the ads to quickly gain control of the room again. Torment of Norgan and Old Man ads spawn in around the edges of the room. They will then start slowly walking in straight lines. If you come into contact with any of them, you'll take incredibly high damage every second, killing you after a tick or two. Now these ads only have 1 health point, but they are immune to damage for 30 seconds when they spawn. The raid needs to dodge them for these 30 seconds before quickly killing them all off. Now the ads can be CC'd in pretty much any way, including things like frost traps, roots, blinds, paralysis, that kind of thing. So the raid wants to group up next to either tank and move around as a group, using CC to create gaps in between the ads that you can safely path through. These 2 groups are best separated by the entire room, so that you don't screw each other over with knockbacks and grips. After the 30 seconds, just finish off all of these ads and the fight will return to normal. That's all the Titan abilities. After one has been cast, another one will be randomly selected to be cast and it will repeat from there. The bosses do switch around after every second Titan ability cast, with Nora and Dima switching first, and Azara and Nora switching second. When the boss rejoins the fight, they will always drop down into the middle of the room, so tanks need to be quick to pick up the new boss before it randomly slaps somebody. And with all of these Titan abilities, they can overlap with Storm of Darkness. There isn't really much you can do here, you just need to do your best to either be spread within a zone when the Golganeth ads are up, or just pick a zone that is out of the way of the old men or the flamethrowers. But aside from that, that's the encounter.
If you'd like to know more about this boss or any of the other bosses in Antorus the Burning Throne, or just have a useful guide to refer to during your raids, then go check out our written work over on Wowhead, the link for that is in the description. If this guide helped you out at all, then drop us down a like as it helps us out a lot. But if you'd like to go that extra mile in supporting us, then feel free to join the amazing group of people who pledge to us on Patreon. A big thank you to that group of people, and of course, thank you guys for watching, and we shall see you next time.
Thanks for watching.